So, how did you just watch that documentary on the Modoc War? Probably one that most of you have never heard of, but a very significant one to solidify essentially the whole discussion of this chapter. I could have showed a documentary really dealing with, General Custer and, the Battle of Little Bighorn, which I was having this big debate with myself to do or not. But I thought that I wanted to end it there as a kind of way to kind of show you a one that you never heard of, and one that essentially is going to be more of a consolidation of this expansion. And so in any case, after you've read this chapter and you've watched this documentary and you've seen these lectures, I'm sure that you are really going to be, it's a challenge, right, to think about what to make of this legacy. But, when it comes to telling U.S. history, or any history, we can select different things, right? So I just want to say before I go into this next part, I could talk about basically, if you look like The Story of Us, which is the PBS series about American history, they try to tell things, in a nuanced way sometimes, but ultimately they're celebrating our legacy, right? And the frontiers people, those who are going out to do the Homestead Act, white and black, and the challenges that were met to create this nation, again, are very, we have a lot of impressive things that we can celebrate. And we could focus on, the interesting topic in here, which I think is also significant, which is African-American cowboys and their legacy. And by the way, a significant portion of cowboys, which comes from Mexican culture and has many black cowboys, it shouldn't surprise us. But what the surprise comes from is that Hollywood has essentially overall muted that out, especially the older films. I grew up as a kid watching cowboy TV shows, and black cowboys were not seen as the norm, or I don't remember ever seeing that at all, actually. And the way that natives were portrayed is quite usually inaccurate. And as a little boy, what's not common now, we played cowboys and Indians. And that was, you could buy toys where you had, I don't know if they still sell those. I'd go to Save Mart or O'Brien's and get a bag in the toy section of little toy cowboys that shoot and fight American Indians. So, it's not like some politically correct modern thing to address this. It's been a part of our culture the whole time. The only thing that's changed is the way that we've been viewing it. And I think that that's important. And that's discussed in the textbook. And I'm actually going to have this as the last lecture on this section. So that's why I'm kind of just summing up a lot of what's in here. So I hope when you look in the page 464 on Historians Reinterpret the American West. And you kind of look at the different way that historians have been analyzing all of this. So, if you're an older student in my class and you grew up and maybe even went to college many decades ago, you might be shocked at the way that this is being discussed here in this class right now. And again, it's a product of change in the different ways we interpret these things. So this history has always been taught, or maybe not always highlighted. But again, it's the way that it's been looked at has been different. Now, what has also changed, though, is historians now do look at people and see their roles that maybe were not talked about. So when it comes like Black History Month, I'll often hear white um, students or white people in general kind of almost feel slighted by this and not really realizing that other than the legacy of slavery, Black Americans don't get a lot of to benefit from U.S. history in terms of things to feel proud of. So they're not on the Native American side of losing, but they're under the context of being the slave American who then gets freed, sort of. And their role in the creating of this nation and asserting themselves gets downplayed. And so I do appreciate that in this chapter they talked about Henry Adams, who, by the way, you can barely find any information on him, even on the internet. And it's not a common thing to know about the Exodusters. It's referring to the story of Exodus. Remember I told you about the Bible, right? Of people being freed from slavery to go conquer the land of Canaan. So we get that biblical imagery even there. Now, I took from one website, and it talked about how in the spring of 1879, the Kansas Exodus swept across Louisiana and Mississippi, and Adams quickly shifted his focus from the Colonization Council to Kansas and encouraged blacks to migrate there. The Colonization Council was trying to help get freed blacks to go to Liberia, which was helped created by the United States with the ultimate idea of freed blacks going there. Liberia was created, but obviously that didn't happen. There wasn't this massive migration into Liberia. And we have to keep in mind that many of the people who were against slavery, as I mentioned, were still racist, and a lot of whites were uncomfortable and hoped that their liberation would mean sending them back to where they were forcibly extracted from. And some blacks even felt that that would be a good idea as well. Ultimately, those kind of projects did not do that. And Kansas was important in the minds of many black people for several things. In the 1850s, before the Civil War, John Brown, if you've heard of him, he's covered my 101 class, went there. And there was a battle for slavery, slavers versus people who were against slavery in creating the state of Kansas. And it was very bloody. And in fact, John Brown was so tired of the violence that the slavers were doing to the anti-slavers that he, at Potawatomi, he shot and killed the pro-slave camp and then chopped them up with pieces with an axe. John Brown was a white Christian man, by the way, who fought on behalf of black people against slavery. And then he was executed by the government when he was caught. And that happened before the Civil War. Okay. So this, the Homestead Act, returning back to that, and returning back to integrating the idea of Native American peoples. And then I'm going to go look in here and end on talking about the Christmas, women, girls, trying to go out in these lonely areas to make it. I mean, this is the struggle, and I think this is why American history is so tragic and so interesting at the same time. As you look into this chapter, we see average, poor people of different races and ethnicities trying to make it, trying to contribute something and make a life for themselves. And we have a combination of the powerful and the exploiters mixed with the low, and ultimately creating something that is very good, but at a very serious cost to certain people. So the railroads were amazing to be built, and then we have all of these suffering railroad workers. We have, women participating, asserting themselves, and blacks at a time where it's only really until now in modern times that women and people of color are even getting acknowledgement as contributors to anything in the world. I mean, I want you to think about that. I have these books from the 19th century, history books, and they're called Great Men and famous women, right? It's not great men and women. It's great men and famous women. Women can be famous, they can't be great, right? It's ridiculous, but that was common and that was normal. And then ultimately, we know that the Native Americans who have been here all along, the American Indians, are ultimately going to pay the price for the freedom that we fought for in our Declaration of 1776. And so we have a lot to chew on, a lot to sit on, a lot to think about in terms of where we are now and what this means now. And I'm not here to I'm not going to be able to answer that for us, and I'm not going to attempt to. My attempt is not to do anything but other than get us to crack open this past, this kind of complex, troubled past, and then see where it converges with the present. And ultimately, we're going to kind of be able to explore that, because as we go into this class, we're going to cram in all these chapters, but we're going to get to modern times, and I want us to be able to kind of reflect on what we've learned from these earlier years. And especially if you've had History 101 already, then you're really going to be able to see this narrative and this story kind of develop for all that is good and bad. So I'm going to end it there. Obviously, I skipped over a lot of parts of this chapter in terms of the lectures. I gave you a long documentary to watch. But I will keep saying this over and over at the end of all my lectures. Please call me if you want clarification or to do a discussion about anything that I said or what I didn't cover in the chapter.